Oh, look at all these beautiful pictures. Just wait till you see my mini lesson. It's going to be lots of videos, lots of pictures, lots of pretty stuff because we're going to be talking about food chains, food webs, and all of those things involve such amazing creatures, including ourselves. So, welcome back to Howie's mini lesson. Today we're going to talk about ecology. Okay, ecology, which you're going to see all around you every day, every minute of your life, is the study of living organisms. But also not just the study of the organisms, their habitats, which is where they live, and how they interact, okay? Not just with each other, like within a community, but how they interact with their habitat and with surrounding, organisms as well. Okay, so the ecology is a really cool kind of broad study of science that incorporates so many things. Look at these cool pictures. So when I look up ecology on Google Images, so many cool images pop up because it is the study of our earth, so to speak, not necessarily, but when we break it down into, the study of living organisms, how they interact in their habitats, we come up with a huge portion of our earth. So plants, animals, the earth in general, it's pretty cool. All right, so let's get into that a little bit more, but before then, of course I have some lovely videos for you guys, and they happen to be from one of my favorite science guys. Here you go. Here's some funny songs to start us off. One, how we're connected.
Science rules. Ow. That's a termite. And that's the tree that it needs to eat. Those two ways connected. Organisms entwined. In relationships respected. And yet we choose species to lose. Think we'll make do. Diversity and ecosystems that we find succeed. And so we shouldn't append organisms on which we might depend. We may not comprehend the strings attached to lives that we end. We need fungi to survive and stay alive. Come on, hummingbirds and cactus, bats and cats and trees. It's like a giant lattice, how we need all of these, even manatees. Even manatees. Science rules. You know we're all connected, connected one and all. Environments reflected in creatures great and small, creatures great and small, creatures great and small.
Okay, so how appropriate that we talk about how we're connected, right? When we think of food webs and food chains, we instantly think of this connecting web, so to speak, right? Hence the name food web. But when we think about it, let's take it a little bit, more broad, like we were talking about with ecology, and really talk about how we're interconnected, how we all kind of use each other, so to speak. So if you need to listen to those words again, stop right now, rewind it, listen to that song again, because it's really important to really grasp how we are connected, because that's how we all end up surviving, is because we are interconnected. So the food web, the circle of life. Yes, I could play that song right now, but I won't. But the truth is that basically we are all interconnected, and I'll show you guys some examples, but I know that in elementary school you guys learned about food webs. You probably created one, in a diorama or on a poster board, but the food webs are very important. We talk about what kind of starts that food web, what's on the bottom of those food chains and food webs, and how they map out. And the circle of life, even though I think that's kind of cheesy, but it all does come back where, when everything dies, it goes back into the earth as decomposition, and that's where life begins once again, and it's sustained through that decomposition and so forth. So we'll talk about all of those different levels of the food chain and the food webs, and basically how that is sustained. So you guys know a little bit about food webs already. So here's some good looks at one. Here's a basic food chain. We talk about the producer, which is the flower, grows in the ground obviously. A caterpillar is a consumer, okay, and it consumes that producer, right? But a frog is also a consumer and could consume that caterpillar, okay? But then you have another consumer, the snake, and then ultimately on top of this food chain is the owl. Now that's just one example of a food chain, okay? But a food web as kind of all these interconnections here. So of course you have plants typically at the bottom here, and all these little, consumers, kind of these first level consumers, rabbits, squirrels, mice, all of those things are eating the plants. But then you have these other consumers, and then ultimately at the top of the food chain, you have these consumers that basically feed off of all of these other things. Okay, so you guys kind of again have a good idea of what a food web is and a food chain, but you may not know the specifics to those. Okay, so before we go into that, I have probably one or two more videos, but let me let you listen to this another song, music to my ears. Oh yeah.
Well, take a look at my plate. It's a sight, cause it's piled with food. While I'm looking it over, and it looks so good. Cause I got milk, I got meat, I got pasta and bread. I got chicken and egg rolls, and processed cheese spread. I got ice cream, I got whipped cream, I got chocolates, I got fish. But none of it seems like a vegetable dish. But the truth of the matter of this food situation is that all of these things get their start with vegetation. It's the food web. It's the food web. See, meat has to eat, and noodles need wheat. Yeah, we need plants for the things that we eat. Cause sugar needs cane, and honey needs bees that get pollen from the flowers in the fields and the trees. But maybe now you're asking, hey, what's a plant need? They gotta come from something, yeah, you know they gotta feed. Well, a plant needs water, and a plant needs sun, dirt, carbon dioxide, and oxygen. It's the food web. It's the food web.
Okay, so the food web, again, when you take a look at that and you see how everything is kind of connected, and obviously on the bottom are our lovely plants, but they need things too, okay? So everything's connected. When you look at, say a plate of food, like, next time you eat dinner, look at your plate of food. Think of where all of that came from meat, dairy, to plants, all of those things all across the food chain, okay? And obviously us as humans, we're on top of that food chain. Yay for us. But if we didn't have some of the things that were lower, then obviously we would go away as well. Okay, so obviously those plants end up being on the bottom level of a food web or a food chain. We call those producers. We also call plants autotrophs. Autotrophs, think of auto as self, okay, or automatic. Those are the two things that you think of, and actually those are the Greek and Latin kind of prefix, but that means self or automatic. So basically, they produce their own nutrients. They are self-producing nutrients, okay? So unlike us, where we have to get our nutrients from other things, plants, they produce their own. Remember through photosynthesis? Recall that, right? Photosynthesis, you need CO2 for these plants, okay? You need sunlight and water, and ultimately they produce glucose, which is the nutrients for plants, oxygen, okay? And so those are the main products of photosynthesis, but they produce their own nutrients. So that's why plants are called autotrophs, and they are producers, okay? Most everything else is a consumer, or what we call a heterotroph. Heterotroph, again, we do not make our own nutrients inside. It's not like we can come up with a hamburger or cheeseburger, kind of like if you guys have ever seen Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. It's not like we are our own kind of food machine. We don't produce it ourselves. We have to go and get it. We have to go and eat it, okay? That's a heterotroph. So pretty much all consumers are heterotrophs, okay? For the most part, although there is carnivorous plants, those are not autotrophs. Okay, although they can be too. Okay, now the other thing is decomposers. So say something dies off, right? Circle of life, something's going to die. Okay, not that it's not going to necessarily come back to life, but at the same time, it will decompose, and you have certain decomposers that break that down into substances that can be used by plants, okay? So obviously worms, they are kind of part of a decomposer, and they break up soil in order to make it a little bit more nutrient rich. But you have molds, you have fungi, all of these things are decomposers that can break down, dying organisms and make it into something useful for plants and those producers at the bottom of the food web. And it's absolutely necessary that if you didn't have those decomposers, then things would kind of come to a screeching halt in a food web. Okay, so they're very important. And the last thing I want you guys to see is the trophic pyramid. What we mean by that is kind of the levels, and we have different names for them, so I want you to get to know these. Obviously the producers, pretty easy, right? Those are the plants. But then you have the primary consumers, okay? Primary would be the first things that eat plants, okay? So they're, rabbits, insects, stuff like that. But the secondary consumers are going to eat the primary consumers, okay? And then the tertiary consumers are basically eating the secondary consumers at the top of the food chain in the food web. Again, look at this one as well. Your producers are your autotrophs, and then all of your consumers are your heterotrophs. And you can go all the way up past the tertiary consumers to the quaternary. So you might even have a level above those tertiary that may eat, that tertiary consumer, and we call that a quaternary consumer, okay? So basically, they're at the top. So again, pretty easy to follow these terms. Producers for the plants, okay? Primary consumers, they're going to eat those producers. Secondary consumers are going to eat the primary consumers, and so forth. You can see that building up, okay? So that's why we call that the trophic pyramid, those levels. Got it? Okay, and we'll touch on that in class as well. So we're going to wrap it up with one more bit of kind of some visuals. So this is just a basic video on the food chain, and I really like it because you can see how these animals kind of work and help the land by eating it, but also provide food for all these different kind of species. So take a look at this, and then we will follow a lot of this stuff up in class.
In every ecosystem, living things are linked by the food they eat and the energy they get from the food. These links taken together make up the food web. Food chains within these webs often involve predator and prey relationships. The grasslands of Serengeti National Park in Tanzania are home to a great diversity of animals, each dependent on the next for survival. Here, where the climate is dry and the soil is poor, grass collects energy from the sun and kicks off each food chain. Plant eaters like these gazelles feed on the grass, and in doing so, they help even more grass grow back in its place. The large number of plant-eating animals found in the Serengeti provides food for many predators. Each predator has its own techniques for hunting prey. Reaching speeds of more than 60 miles per hour, cheetahs are fast enough to run down gazelles. Lions aren't so fast and tend to sneak up on their prey with little warning. Hyenas can bring down animals more than 3 times their weight. One zebra yields plenty of food for a group. Most of the time, these predators work together, but in the end, they often compete with each other for the catch. Hyenas and cheetahs are fierce competitors. Not only do they steal each other's food, they also attack each other's cubs. In a pinch, these predators become clever scavengers. Large predators need to eat less frequently than other animals because their bodies use up energy at a much slower rate. Anything they leave behind gets broken down and eventually returned to the soil as nutrients for plants. The food chain always starts as photosynthesis and ends in decay.
So there's some great pictures, some visuals of food chains and food webs and how everything interacts. So again, we'll talk more about this in class, but hopefully you enjoyed some of those visuals, and we'll chat more. Bye-bye.